Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Anne Archer, and she's going to tell us about her near-death experiences and some other spiritual experiences she's had. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Peggy. I've
So
enjoyed chatting with you, and I think you want to hear about my near-death
I
experience.
do,
Is that
I
correct?
do.
I will tell you one that this is a this is a normal near-death experience, if there is such a thing. I was driving along a highway with my daughter late at night. I had picked her up. She'd been away for a week, and her dirty clothes were in a duffel bag. Now, she's only 3 years old at the time. Back then, we didn't even have seatbelts in the car. And so she's sitting in the front seat, no seatbelt, but she has that duffel bag of clothes stuffed in the front, and she's fallen asleep on it. And I'm just driving along peacefully, listening quietly to the radio. And all of a sudden, I noticed that there were headlights coming on the other side of the road, but they were erratic, weaving across the road and back. And so I slowed way down, not wanting to engage with that vehicle. And as it neared me, I saw that it was a big truck, and it actually left the highway on the opposite side of the road, went into an embankment, and I thought, oh my gosh, that truck has wrecked, and I have to stop now in order to help them, because whoever that was, they're in a big truck and they just wrecked. And so I pulled over to the side of the road. But just as I start to open the door, the car, the truck on the other side seems to be having the gas pedal accelerated so much that it turns from the embankment, comes back into the highway, goes across the highway, and just as it gets on my side, it makes a distinct turn and comes head on toward me. And it hit my car going, they estimated between 65 and 75 miles an hour, and I'm a small sports car dead stop. So when it hit my car, it pushed the engine forward. It broke the seat that I was sitting in. And so now I'm lying down backwards because the seat is broken. My back is broken in two places in the process. And my daughter was stuffed into that duffel bag that her head was leaning on. Well, as it turns out, my body is covered in cuts because it was before safety glass had been moved up to, my car was older, to the place that it is now. And I had fragments of glass everywhere and even shards of glass everywhere. My eyes were filled with glass. My tongue was filled with glass. My ear was cut open, completely off on one side, just dangling there. My head was cut open from here all the way around to that ear. And my body was cut and bleeding everywhere. And I had internal bleeding from head to toe. Later, my entire body would turn black with internal bleeding everywhere. And if I touched my skin really hard in any one spot, blood would actually come out of some of my pores. There was so much damage done to my body. So the wreck occurs. I'm hit by the truck, and I instantly leave my body. And I'd been a student of meditation, contemplative type spiritual exercises from much of my adult life. So I understood an out-of-body experience and what that was. But my first feeling as I popped out of my body and found myself in the trees above the scene of the accident was, oh, thank God, I'm free at last. And I sort of stretched my invisible wings. I don't even see the body that I'm in. I'm in a light body, but I stretched my invisible wings, and I'm so excited and deliriously happy to be free of my physical body. And I look down at the scene and I see my body, which is dead, and I don't want to go back. And then I hear what's going on at the scene, as if someone turned up the volume so that I could be reminded of what's going on. The car behind us had stopped. It had been way behind us, but it stopped when it got up to us. And it turned out that the woman who was the passenger in the car, was a kindergarten teacher. So she approached the car, sees my 3-year-old daughter stuffed with just her feet hanging out of the duffel bag, and reaches in and pulls her free. And my daughter sees my body and says, my mommy bleed, help her. And the woman says, oh yes, come with me and I'll take care of your mommy too. And she's patting Sarah, my little 3-year-old daughter, on her shoulder. And, thank goodness it was a kindergarten teacher, because she's so compassionate and she's so helpful and she understands how exactly to talk to Sarah to calm her down. But then I realize I cannot stay up here. I have to go back. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I can't leave her there. It's as if you're at the most magnificent ball in the world and the music is swirling around you and everything is so beautiful and you want nothing more than to dance the night away, but you realize your child is standing right outside the door and you have to leave. And so I thought, okay, I have to get back in that body. But I don't want to get back in the body. Even as I approach the body, so I am this floating being of light. And as I approach the body, I began to feel the nausea. And I hate the feeling of nausea. It's a terrible feeling, but this was overwhelming nausea, like just beyond my belief. And I'm thinking, I can't go back in there yet. This isn't good. And I'm perfectly happy and pain-free on this side. But I know I have to get back in there, but I'm trying to buy time. And now the emergency vehicles have arrived on the scene. And I see there's one ambulance and I see them rescuing the driver. Well, I approached his vehicle just to look as this light body that I am, and I see that he has a big cut on his face. It's almost like his head was almost cut off, and he's in really bad shape. And they put him in the ambulance and they race off with him. And I'm like, but wait, but I can tell what's going on too, because all around him, there is the smell of alcohol. Extreme smell of alcohol, and I'm in this super sensitive state, so it's like I'm breathing in whiskey, and it's like, oh my God, he was a drunk driver, he hit us, and now they're taking him away. Why aren't they paying any attention to me? And I look over and there are some men around my car, and they have what's called the jaws of life, and they have a torch. And the torch is like a blowtorch, and it's going, and they're approaching my vehicle on the passenger side. And not the passenger side, on the driver's side, where my body is. And I'm like, whoa, you're going to burn it. I have to get back in that body. Don't burn it. And yet they're not. They're doing that. And they're giving each other instructions. And I'm like, geez, why are they so callous with me? And then it dawned on me, because I actually am dead, so they're not the least bit worried. Then I see the next vehicle arrive, and I'm like, oh, there's my ambulance. But when the lights get past so that I can actually see the vehicle, it's this big curvy thing. And I thought, what is that? That's not an ambulance. And I realized, oh, gee, it's a hearse.
Oh.
And so they've called the hearse, they've pronounced me dead. And I'm still lying in there, fully aware that I have a body, and no one's intervened or entered into conversation with me. There's no other beings there. I am simply free in the inner worlds, let's say. And I know I can go further. I know I can go deeper, but there's no way I'm going to leave my daughter. There's just simply no way. And it's like, don't even try to pull me in that direction, because I'm not going. But I know I have to get closer to that body, and I feel the nausea. I feel the pain of it. And I begin to move forward toward it. And I want to stop the blowtorch. I don't want them to burn my body. It's already in bad enough shape. So I actually do the craziest thing, like diving into water. I dove into my body. And it's the only way I could get myself to do it, like going into really cold water when you don't want to, and you have to just jump in or you can't force yourself. That's what I had to do. I had to just dive into my body. And when I did, it was so painful and I was so sick. And it was so shocking to be in that body that it shot me right back out. I'm in and I'm out and I can't stay in. And I'm like, all right, I got to do this again. And I dive back in again. And it's horrible, painful, anguish, horrible nausea. And I know that I have a mouthful of glass, so I can't swallow or anything. And then I hear the man who's holding the blowtorch say to me, if you're alive in there, honey, you got to give me a sign because I think this is the end of the line. And above the rubble, my left hand is sticking up and my little finger is not hurt and I wiggle it. And the man screams, oh my God, she's alive. At that point, I automatically pop out of my body again. I can't stay there. But it bought enough time that he turned off that blowtorch and he starts screaming to them to get into action, to get the jaws of life. They literally do put me in the hearse to take me to the hospital, but it's a process of me diving in and popping out, diving in and popping out. That's exactly what I did all the way to the hospital. And finally, we get to the hospital. I black out. I don't know anything at that point. And I wake up under very bright lights. And my tongue is in a torture device. It's like a medieval torture device. My tongue is sticking way out. And there's this contraption, this stainless steel contraption that clamps the tongue. And they are pulling pieces of glass out one by one. And he's saying, you can't vomit, honey, you got to hold on there. Yeah. Because of course I still have the horrible nausea and they're pulling on my tongue and it makes me want to vomit that much more. And I know from my background in meditation and contemplation and spiritual exercises that there is an ancient name for God that's a very high vibration word, and it pops into my head and I can't speak it because they're holding my tongue, but they're also now clamping my eyes because they are intending to pull the pieces of glass out of my eyes. So all this work is going on and they're holding my head together. So I have like all these nurses and 2 doctors in there holding my head together because of the huge cut in it, and they can't sew it up yet. So they've prioritized what they're going to do, get the glass out of the mouth, then the glass out of the eyes, then we're going to work on the head. And I, of course, know none of that, but I keep leaving my body. I keep popping out of my body and coming back, and I'm in my body. And just as they finish the tongue torture and it's free of glass and they're giving my tongue back, I said the word Hugh, and he said Hugh, and I said, yes, please. And he starts chanting the word Hugh, this doctor, country doctor in the middle of Indiana, Hugh. And at the same time, he tells the nurses and others in the room, sing that word. She wants you to sing Hugh. And so they start doing it. Now I'm thinking it and dealing with this pain. Oh my God, glass in the eyeballs. I'm telling you, it's just unbelievable, the nasty pain that's going on and the horrible nausea. And as they begin to sing that word or chant it in the room, the pain's gone. And I start talking to the doctor. And I said, oh, okay, that feels a lot better now. And he goes, you're kidding. And you can hear the nurse going, oh my God, her vitals are stabilizing. They're stabilizing. And, the whole scene changes to one of peace. And they finish with my eyeballs. And then they say, okay, now you have a bad concussion and your head is cut open. And we're going to have to put a lot of stitches in your head. And we've got to put your ear back on. And this is going to be really painful. And I said, it's okay as long as we can sing Hugh. Can you do that? I don't have enough strength now to barely speak to them, but they said yes, they could do it. And so that's what they did. They chant this word while they're doing their work. Everybody is quiet except the sound of Hugh in the room. It's an ancient name of God. You know, there are various charts that show where the various sounds in the inner planes come from and what vibration is associated with them. And above, like the chant of Om, there's another and another, and finally you get to Hugh, this ancient name of God. And that's what they chanted. One woman, there's another word, hum, as actually one of the words in the planes. She chanted that word, and he corrected her, and he said, no, Hugh, which was interesting because we needed it to be at a certain level to keep me out of pain. With that in the room, they were able to sew up my head. They were able to do everything. And in the middle of this, my daughter is in the hallway screaming bloody murder. She's with this teacher, but she's now tired of waiting to see her mother. She wants to know I'm alive, and her dad has not arrived yet. And so I can hear her, and I said, can you just bring her in here? You know, just float her in here above me so she can see me. And there's lights everywhere because they're doing all this delicate stuff. But I said, she's little, just squeeze her in here for a second so she has 1 second to see that I'm alive. And they said, we can do that. And so they have these orderlies take her, and, you know, one has one shoulder, one has the other shoulder, one has one leg. 4 guys bring her in, float her over me. And she goes, oh, mommy, you're messy. And I said, but I'll be okay. And she said, okay. I assured her dad was coming, and she left. All through that, no pain whatsoever. The nausea is gone. And finally they're finished. I don't really remember the end of it and getting in the hospital room, but I remember waking up in the hospital room the next morning. And the next morning, I wake up, open my eyes, and there's 2 doctors and 2 nurses who were in that room waiting there for me. And I said, oh, good morning. I said, I get to see all of you. It's not everyone who was in the room, but at least those 4. And they said, do you feel well enough to talk? And I said, well, sure. And I said, thanks to you, I'm feeling much better. And they said, well, the swelling has gone down tremendously. And you know, we think that it might have something to do with the experience we had last night. Can you tell us what we were doing? They wanted to know about the chant. You know, what was that? And is it just you? Can we only use it for you? Could you only use it? Or can we do that for other patients? I marveled at their openness because, you know, it's not always that way. But they had actually experienced it, and they had experienced it in a moment when it was, you know, really important, because prior to that, the nurse in the operating room had been saying, we're losing her because of my vitals. They were going down, and the trauma had just been too much. And who knew what, you know, well, I died once, now I'm on the table again. So who knows what was about to happen, but they changed everything by changing the vibration. And that's why I love this particular story, because to me, it has influenced everything from that point on. I understood the concept before, but after that, I realized that, I mean, how miraculous is that? No nausea, no pain, and they're plucking glass out of your eyes, for God's sake, and sewing up your head and your ear. And I realized, well, if we can simply change our own vibrations, if we can reach a higher place where there isn't pain, pain is a certain vibration, nausea is a certain vibration, anger is a certain vibration. If we can change our vibration, like from anger to gratitude, everything changes. Everything is transmuted around us. So that's been a very, very influential moment in my life, and beautiful. And my daughter, by the way, when they plucked her out of the duffel bag, you know, here I am covered in glass from head to toe and bleeding everywhere. She had one little piece of glass that had gone through the heavy canvas of the duffel bag, and it was a shard that long, but only the tiniest little tip had hit her body, and they plucked it out, cleaned it up, put a Band-Aid on it. She was done. And so the duffel bag, the dirty clothes, actually saved her life completely. And I realized the experience was really mine. It was also a deeply karmic experience because of the age that I was. I was in my early 30s. I was exactly the age that my father had died when I was a child. And that was so traumatic for me, losing my father when I was 7 years old. It was a horrible experience. I adored my father. And here I was about to lose my daughter, about to leave her behind. And it was like, there's no way, this is happening. And yet it was. And so it was my karmic due. If I had not been leading my life up to this point in a certain way, that was an exit strategy for this being as soul to leave. And yet it was all possible to transmute it, to change everything, to move into a new higher perspective. And my life, although it took me a long time to recover, I mean, for weeks, I couldn't even walk. I had to have someone take me to the bathroom, or I couldn't get out of bed, even after I'm home from the hospital. But everyone was magnificent around me. Everyone rallied, and life took on new meaning, I guess you would say. It took on new purpose, and I felt like I had learned a vital lesson about where to live my life, not to let the little things especially pull me down and get aggravated, but to stay grateful, to stay open, to stay in alignment with love, and really ask myself at every turn, what would love do now instead of reacting to things, and keep myself in a higher state of consciousness, a higher state of awareness. And so I don't even think of it as a dark and difficult time. I think of it as the time when I had that magnificent blessing. So
Was this in the 70s?
Well, let's see. It was 1982.
Okay. I just want to clarify that because some people are too young to remember life before we were required to use seatbelts. Like nobody used seatbelts. Nobody had car seats. Our kids rode up front on our laps,
I mean, I can't even believe we did that now. I remember my daughter, I had a car, maybe I borrowed this car for the weekend or something, because I don't remember actually owning it, but I had a Volkswagen Beetle which had a sunroof on it. And I remember my daughter standing in the seat with her head sticking out of the sunroof. And she and I both thought it was the most fun thing in the world. So, we just were unconscious of those particular things at that time. So, her seatbelt in that case was the duffel bag. And it did protect her. And so I was very grateful. It was my experience. I needed to have the experience. And fortunately, I lived to tell the tale.
Now, had you pulled over and stopped?
I had pulled over because I thought I was going to have to go rescue that man in the truck who had crashed on the opposite side of the road. But what had happened, of course, as you know now, he was drunk, and he was asleep. So when he crashed, he was still unconscious, but his foot was on the gas pedal. That's why the truck took off and turned itself, because he's leaning on the wheel, and came right at me. I mean, he hit me as straight dead on as you could possibly. In fact, the top of my car was cut off my car. It just snapped and went off. My seat was broken. I mean, the car was so demolished when we went back to look at it. I could hardly believe we walked out of it. Much more so on my side, because he hit directly on the driver's side, slightly off skew to the passenger side, thank goodness. But the rest of the car was found blocks down the road. And that's where the woman who was the kindergarten teacher, that's where she had seen it. They first saw debris flying down the road and thought, what on earth? And pulled off themselves, and then realized there must be a car somewhere. And then they found us. And it was dark, a country road. Thank goodness there was somebody coming who saw me, but that's why I had pulled off, because it was a dark country road and I thought there's nobody, and we didn't have cell phones. So there's no way I can call for help. If that man's going to have
Right.
help, I have to get out of the car and go do it myself. So that was what I was in the process of doing, but I hadn't stepped out of the car yet, because then I saw the lights turn and start coming back in my direction. And it looked like he was going to crash on the opposite side, but instead suddenly it turned and went straight head on to me.
Wow. I'm glad you're here to tell the story. I mean,
Yes. Now that was the real near death experience where I was completely out of my body. But I had another experience earlier. As I told you, I'd been a spiritual student for years. I'd grown up very Christian background, very devout in my beliefs. And what had happened previously was, long before my daughter was born, just when I had met my husband to be, and we were dating, I had this other experience where I was working on my master's degree. I have a master's in English and education, and I was about to go to a night class. So I was teaching during the day, teaching high school, and going to school at night to finish my master's degree. And before class, my boyfriend came to visit me, John, and we were sitting there having, iced tea to drink, nothing going on, just chatting away. And all of a sudden I said to him, wow, do you see that funny black spot in the middle of the room? I wonder if there's something wrong with my eyes. And I'm looking back and forth. And I said, do you see it? Do you see that black spot? And he goes, Anne, what's wrong with you? And I said, I see a black spot in the middle of the living room. Do you not see it? It's like dangling right in the middle of the room. And he said, nope, I don't see a black spot. And I said, oh no, I'm being pulled out into the black spot. Now, I had never experienced anything like this. It was as if I were being vacuum sucked out of my own body, and I'm heading toward that little black spot. I didn't know any of this. I hadn't studied, this was a long time ago. So I hadn't studied near-death experiences. I didn't know anything like this. But I know I'm being sucked out of my own body, and I'm telling him, hold me, because I feel like I'm gonna die, because I can feel the separation of one self and the other self. And that was my first experience of, wow, my true self is not that body, and I am leaving it, and I don't know where I'm going, but there's this black circle in the middle of the room. I go right out of my body, through the black circle, and it is a dark tunnel, freezing cold, dark tunnel, absence of light, absolute. And I'm freezing, shaking on the couch, and he's holding me. Fortunately, I have his account of it too, which is very interesting. And I go through that dark tunnel, and then I see this tiny, tiny little bit of light in the far distance, and I'm being pulled toward it. But the closer I get to that light, the warmer I get. It's getting warmer and warmer, and I want the warmth. So I'm going toward the light, and then suddenly I erupt in full, brilliant light, and I am standing in what looks like an ocean made of golden and white waves of light. And I realize it's not water, but it looks exactly like an ocean, and I'm moving my hand in it, and it's blissful. And as I said previously, I'd had another experience where I actually knew this out-of-body sensation of absolute freedom. And it was, to me, my daughter's not been born yet, oh wow, I want to stand right here forever, because the bliss of this light that I was standing in was so magnificent. I'd never even had a glimmer of this much joy in my life. And people know me as a very happy person, but I knew nothing compared. This is the bliss of God. This is the bliss of the heavenly worlds. And I want to stay here forever. I am ready. I'm done. I'm yours. Keep me here forever. And I hear a voice, and the voice says, there is much to be done, and you must return. And let's say it was like a man's voice, but it's also telepathic. I can feel it in every cell of my body. And I don't want to return. And maybe I'm a little willful. And so I'm fighting for, I want to stay. I don't want to go back. And I'm fairly argumentative about it, but the voice says, when it is time, you will return. And I realize it's not going to be of my own volition, but I intend to fight tooth and nail to stay right where I am. And then I look up and I see the most magnificent waterfall that I could ever imagine. And it's as if all the love in the world is pouring toward me from this waterfall. And this voice says, this is the ocean of mercy and love. And I am like, who could ask for anything more? I won't ask for a chair to sit down in. I'll stand here forever. I have no needs. I want nothing. I'll just bathe in this bliss forever. And the sense that I had was that somehow I had been blessed. Now, I was a high school teacher and I loved teaching high school, and I worked really hard to help my students. And I knew a lot of teachers did not make the effort that I made. I mean, I taught seniors who could barely read. And so I began after school programs helping it was often football players, unfortunately, helping them learn how to read and to write so they could really write a senior thesis and they could graduate. And I spent a lot of extra time at school, but, to the point of others, I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I did have that extra time, but I felt like by being of service to others that perhaps I had earned this. And, I wanted to plead my case that.
So is your daughter grown by then, or?
No, this is before I ever had my daughter.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I am with the father of my daughter, and he's my boyfriend, and we're just getting to know each other.
Okay.
Just at the beginning of our relationship. So we've gone backwards in time from the full-on near-death experience to this very mystical experience. And as it turns out, this too is a near-death experience, only it's not my near-death experience. This is called a shared near-death experience that I'm having. And now I have heard of that. At the time, I had no clue whatsoever what was happening. So as I'm looking at this magnificent waterfall, I hear a voice that says, close your physical eyes. So back on the couch with my boyfriend, I have my eyes wide open and I don't see anything. I'm just shaking and he's holding me, and I close my eyes, close my physical eyes. And then it was as if I put sunglasses on in the inner world. With my eyes closed back there, now I can see everything. I can look into the light, and it's not so brilliant that I almost want to turn away. It's magnificence that I can completely bathe in, and it's just beautiful. And I want to just stay there forever. And I have this moment where it appears no one's saying anything to me, and maybe I get to stay. And then I heard, there are 10 things that you must remember. And this is when I became belligerent. And I said, I don't want to remember the 10 things. I don't even care about the 10 things. Tell somebody else the 10 things. I don't want to know. Because if I get the 10 things, I'm going to have to take them back. I know that. I don't want the 10 things. There are 10 things that you must know. And then they are not only delivered, but they're delivered in such a way that it's like, they're delivered into every cell of my body. And here's what they are. I'm going to read them to you. I looked them up again today, so I get my wording exactly right. I heard and felt these messages going through me. Number one, although you have absolutely no intellectual knowledge of what is occurring, someone very close to you appears to be dying. Number 2, in truth, there is no death, only the illusion of death. Number 3, however, upon learning of this apparent death, you must go at once to this person. Number 4, in order to help this person, you will be instructed and must follow these instructions as they are given. Number 5, you must tell everyone concerned this is not death. Number 6, after this experience, this person will be better off than ever before. Number 7, however, it will not appear to be so. Number 8, you must leave here when you are told to go, although you will not wish to. For number 9, you have much to do. You must listen carefully and do as you are instructed. And number 10, remember, and this is the most important one to me of all, everything is always happening exactly as it should, whether it appears that way or not. So, that was kind of saying it's all God's will, the tests, the conditions of life, and that it all has meaning and purpose. And it's so easy for us to think that things aren't exactly as they should be. But in the moment, I don't care about those 10 things. And I continue to belligerently fight to stay right where I am and say, I don't want to go. If there is no death, who cares if someone appears to be dying? Let somebody else go. Somebody else can do this. I'm already here. Just leave me here. But no, and no one even answered me. It was like I was speaking to myself. It was like, it's irrelevant what you're saying and doing. It doesn't matter. And then suddenly I felt that same vacuuming sensation. I'm going back through the tunnel and I see myself flying through the tunnel and back through the darkness. I feel the cold and plop, I'm back on the couch in the living room. John is still holding me tight and he's saying, Anne, what's going on? What's going on? And I look up at him and I said, oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe. I need a pen and paper to write down these 10 things. And he says, oh my gosh, Anne, what happened to you? And I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you looking at me that way? And he takes me by the elbow and he leads me to the guest bathroom so that I could look in the mirror. And I look in the mirror at my face and my eyes are sunburned, completely sunburned, as if I've been out on the beach, not wearing sunglasses all day long. And you know how you get the red rims and the whites turn red and they're all streaky and there's kind of teary wetness all around because your eyes are too strained. That's exactly what my eyes look like. And I said, oh my gosh, John, I actually went there and I looked into the light and they told me to close my physical eyes. That must have been some sort of protection for how close I was to that brilliant light. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll get the pen and paper. So he gets the pen and paper. And he said, you're sure you're not high, right? And I'm like, John, of course I'm not high. And he goes, I'm just checking. But he gets me the pen and paper and I write down the 10 things and I leave them there because I have to go to my master's class. After this, I have to get in my car and drive to the university. So I do that and I leave the 10 things there. He says, Anne, you just leave. I'll close up your apartment for you. And, he had a key too. So I said, okay. And I left. Well, he looked at the 10 things and he read them carefully. So he knew what they were. He thought, wow, we're in the middle of some sort of a mystery here. I don't know what it is. But I went to my master's degree class. Now, part of my master's degree in English and education, I had started studying comparative world religions because there was so much going on in my life. This was not the only mystical thing that was happening in my life. And in order to understand better what was going on, I felt like I needed more than my little Southern Baptist Christian background. I needed to learn more about what's going on in the universe and what the possibilities are, because none of this is part of, my reality. And this is that class. That night, I'm in comparative world religions, and there's a guest speaker, and he is speaking about the fact that there are key places on the planet that have a very high vibration, that these are spiritual centers on the planet. And I can't remember where they are. One of them is Sedona, Arizona. There's others I can't remember because I don't even stay that night. But he starts the class. It's a 3-hour class, like on a Tuesday night. And I'm there at 6 o'clock. We get out at 9, and it's a big deal class. I can never miss a class because they're so many hours long. And he starts lecturing, and he's only about 15 minutes in, and he stops. And he said, I need everybody to take a break. And everybody's like, we just got here and we got hours to go yet. But okay, if he wants to take a break. And he goes, and leave the room, please. And so everybody starts getting up and leaving the room. And I'm way in the back, kind of trying to hide, because by now what's happened to me has left me exhausted. I'm just tired. I'm just downright, I just want to go to bed and pull the covers over my head. And as I'm standing up thinking, all right, I'll go to the restroom or something, he walks toward the back of the room and he says, I need you to stay. And I said, oh, okay. And I sat back down, happy to sit down. I'm exhausted. But then I got worried about, why does he want to talk to me? There's lots of kids in this class. And he said, you've had a mystical experience, haven't you? And I said, how would you know that? And he said, your eyes. And I said, oh my God, yeah, I know. They're like sunburned, huh? And I'm not admitting anything. I'm just acting like in the middle of Indiana in April, it's fine to get sunburned eyes, right? And he said, you're also glowing. And I said, what? And he said, you're glowing. There's a light coming from you, and it's real powerful. And I said, does everybody see it? And he said, no. He said, I'm trained to see this sort of thing. He said, this is what I do. And he said, but I know you have had some major experience here. And he said, do you want to share it? He's all excited. I'm like, no, I don't. It's the last thing in the world that I want to do. And he said, I understand. And, to me, it's not just that it was private. I had not had time to even gather myself yet to understand what happened to me. I don't understand the sucking myself out of my body. I don't know where I went. I don't know why I've been given the 10 things. This message is about death. So I don't know what to do with that. I don't know who it is that appears to be dying. I don't know when I'm going to get instructions. There's just a whole myriad of things that I'm confused about. And mostly that was my state of consciousness at that moment, was exhaustion and confusion on many levels, spiritual level, intellectual level, physical level. I'm just confused. And so he kind of chuckled and he said, I understand. And he said, but I don't think you should stay here tonight. And I said, oh, no. I'm an honor student. I need credit for every class. I can't skip. And he said, I am the professor tonight, and I will give you credit for coming to this class, but you don't need to hear what I have to say. You're already in the middle of something much bigger than what I'm talking about, and you need to go home to bed. And I was like, oh, thank God. I'm gonna get credit for the class, and I get to get in my car and go home. Oh, thank goodness. So I went to bed that night, and when I woke the next morning, it had been really warm the day before, like a spring 70s kind of day. When I woke up the next morning, everything was covered in snow. No snow had been predicted, so I was shocked because we were supposed to have nice weather all week. It's like, where did this come from? And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I wonder if it's real snow or not real snow. But I went outside and indeed it was real snow. And I, felt like, gosh, it's like a white blanket of purity over everything. I feel really blessed by the snow, and maybe everything will work out okay. And whatever's happening, it won't bother me and it'll be okay. And I get dressed and I go to school. I've told nobody except John, my boyfriend, what had happened. And I get to class, and I am just getting started in my first class when the principal comes walking in the room. And I'm with a bunch of juniors, so these kids are 16 and 17 years old. And they're teasing me, oh, look, the principal's here, and because he's coming toward me. And I said, what is it? I'm in the middle of teaching class. And he said, I need you to come with me and bring your purse. And I'm like, where am I going? I'm in the middle of teaching class. Now, I was very faithful to my teaching. I loved teaching. I never, ever missed class. And now I realize I'm going to go somewhere. I'm like, where am I going? And he said, I'll explain to you later. And the kids are all like, ooh, you're in trouble. And I said, okay, whoever comes here to take over the class, you need to be good and finish what you're. And he goes, you need to come with me now. And I said, oh, okay. So I follow him and leave. Don't even get to finish giving instructions to my students, go down to the principal's office, and there's my boyfriend standing there. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he said, Anne, you need to come with me now. And I'm like, what is going on? Where is everybody rushing me to? And he said, you see this? And I'm like, yes. And he goes, this is a suitcase of your clothes. And I'm like, where am I going? And he said, you have to get on an airplane right now. The person who appears to be dying is your sister in New York City. Now I'm in Indiana. He said, I've already booked the flight and you need to go with me now. You need to get on that airplane. And I said, okay. And I said, what's happened? What's wrong with her? And he said, they don't know. She's in a coma. They honestly don't expect her to live for you to get there, but your mother is there. And I read to her the 10 things. And I said, oh my gosh, you read the 10 things to my mother? It's like my Southern Baptist mother, that makes no sense. And he said, she believed it. She believed it. She's had enough experiences in her life, she said, that she believes it. So she believes that her oldest daughter is not dying, that it's only, as the 10 things say, the appearance of death and not death itself. And in fact, it says in reality, there is no death. So my mother is calm and cool. When she meets me at the airport, she doesn't act upset at all. And I said, Mom, why are you so, peaceful about everything? Debbie looks like she's dying and she's in a coma. And she said, well, you're the one who wrote that she's not dying, and I choose to believe you. And I'm like, well, we better get to the hospital quickly then. And nothing had happened yet. Remember, it said that I needed to follow all instructions as they were given. Well, John telling me to come and the principal, that might be instructions, but it really hadn't even started yet. As we approached the hospital, I felt this energy go through me, just this powerful energy. The closest I've ever come to being able to explain what that was like is the Marvel comics, where somebody's got a superpower, and just before their superpower comes on, they, get all this energy and suddenly they develop wings or sticky fingers or whatever. So the energy pours through me, and suddenly I know I have to go to my sister and I have to touch her. So I go into the hospital, we get into where my sister is, but they don't know what's wrong with her, and she's in a coma. They brought her in New York City. She passed out in the middle of the street with friends. They have no idea what's wrong with her. And I said, I have to get in that room with her. It's a glass room they have her in with 2 nurses on the inside. And they said no. And I put my hand up like this, and the nurse that was blocking the door suddenly just scooted away. And I opened the door and I walked in. So the other 2 nurses approached me like, you can't touch her, you can't get near her. And I put my hands up like this, and both nurses scooted away rather rapidly too. It was a little upsetting to them. And they didn't get hurt or anything, but they definitely moved away, not of their own volition. And I approached my sister's body and I touched her head. Now, she's been in a coma. She is absolutely white as a ghost. She opens her eyes, comes out of the coma, and said, oh, Annie, I had the worst headache. And I said, I know, Debbie, but it's going to be all right. Just relax. And I put my hand on her head, and I have the first experience of this type that I've ever had. I can actually see inside her head. I see her brain, and I see these little tubes with balloons on them. And I don't know why she has little balloons in her head, but I see them. I know exactly where they are. And I turned to the nurses and I said, you need to go and get a doctor and bring him here to me. And they both acted very hesitant, and they don't want to approach me again, but they don't know what to do. And my mother said, I would do what she says if I were you. So one of them leaves. She comes back with the doctor. The doctor is a young New York City doctor. He walks in and he says, do you know something that I need to know? And I said, yes. If I explained to you that there were broken balloons in my sister's brain and I could identify where they are, would that make sense to you? And he said, yes, those balloons are called aneurysms. If you believe there's aneurysms and you can identify the location, I can actually operate and perhaps I can save her. And I said, can you draw a brain for me? And he did. He got a piece of paper and a pen and he drew the brain and the two sides and showed me where the hemispheres are. And he said, there, now can you do a diagram of exactly where the balloons are? And I said, yes. And I draw the little balloons in. And I said, but why are you listening to me? And he said, I mean, he's a New York City surgeon. I'm just a woman off the street. And he said, I've seen this sort of thing before. Right now, you know more about what's going on than anybody else. And so, of course, I'm going to listen to you. You and your mother will have to sign off on this, but if I operate according to your instructions, I should be able to save her life, because this is a good position where these aneurysms are located, if you're accurate. And I said, I'll sign. My mother said, I'll sign, because she's heard the 10 things. and so they operate on my sister. Indeed, it was aneurysms. They were able to go in and repair all the damage done. And my sister came out of it perfectly, able to walk, talk, write, speak, everything. But remember the part of the 10 things where it says, after this experience, this person will be better off than ever before. Number 7 says, however, it will not appear to be so. And what happened next was, after my sister comes out of the surgery, I have to leave and go back home and go back to teaching, and she's in the hospital recuperating. But my sister was very, very beautiful, and long dark hair and very striking and somewhat vain, let's say. And she doesn't have any mirrors in her hospital room, because they don't want her to see what she looks like, because they've shaved her head for the surgery on her brain, and parts of her brain had swollen during the bleed, and it does not look pretty. And she gets up in the middle of the night, disconnects my sister was Mensa, brilliant, and she was able to unhook herself so there's no alarms going off, sneak out into the hallway, go into the next room that she knew was empty, because she couldn't hear the person anymore that day, and the nurse said they were able to go home, goes into the bathroom where there's mirrors, sees what she looks like, is so shocked that she faints, falls down and hits her head. And has a stroke.
Oh my gosh.
Has a stroke because she's just out of brain surgery. And they're all horrified that this has happened. But, you know, I understood number 7 was that she's going to be better off than she ever was before. It just doesn't look that way. So my sister is very aggressive, very brilliant, a mathematician. She figures out, okay, there's one, if we don't have computers or anything to do research, but she talks to the nurses and she finds out that there's one hospital in New York that has the best success rate of getting people over strokes. And at that point, she's paralyzed a lot across her body. And she orders online, she gets the phone and orders online a walker, which she can use because she can use her arms. but she's not really strong enough. But she hires a transportation company, you know, like if you hired not a cab, but like a town car, and it would come with its own service company with two men who would, you know, be in the town car. Those men came in the hospital and got her and took her out of the hospital and put her in other hospital without my mother or I even knowing what had happened, because she didn't want any argument. So she was able to get herself so she could walk and talk and drive. She always had a limp in her left leg, and her left arm always drug a little bit, but she came out of it really well. But it made her much stronger, much less vain, and much more spiritual or religious. She turned back to the religion of our childhood, back to her roots in Christianity after this. So that's what it meant. You know, she would become a much more evolved spiritual person, because now she wasn't focused on herself and her looks, but on her gratitude to be alive and what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. And I felt very blessed that I was able to participate in that way. But I'll tell you, you know, I could say it took me months to understand what happened, but it wouldn't be true. It took me years to even begin to understand what happened, years to understand. And I didn't speak about it. You would think, you know, oh my God, I've had the most amazing miracle, and I know there's no death, and, you know, you run through the street and tell the world. But I did not want to open my mouth. And it wasn't about what someone might think of me or whether they would question my sanity, though I know that's probably true for a lot of people. I felt that it was too delicate and precious, as if I'd been given the most rare flower that's alive, and that it's from the planet Mars, let's say, and that as long as I kept it protected with my love and didn't expose it to the harshness of the world, that I could keep it alive. And this mystical, magical beingness that would allow such a thing to happen would stay with me. And otherwise I might lose it, because the world is somewhat harsh, relatively.
Yeah, they could take it away from you.
Yeah. And just the disbelief or the questioning of it.
Yes.
And so, you know, in all honesty, it was years before I could speak about this, except I did have this other aspect. It was my high school students. You couldn't put anything past them. They knew everything. When I came back in the classroom, you know, they knew, they were quickened by being in my presence. And they said, I walked out of here, you know, I normally get B's, maybe a C if I don't study at all. And, you know, I aced the test. I knew everything. I'm like, what's that got to do with me? And they said, I wouldn't ace the test, except now I have this knowingness. Where did I get it? It's like there's this cosmic knowingness coming off of you, and we're all picking up on it. And the school board found out about what was going on in the classroom, because kids were begging to be in my classroom, begging to be. And I taught English. Who wants to be in an extra English class? But they're like, okay, I want to take two. I want 2 English classes. Oh, you have a study hall. Why don't you want your study hall? Because I want that English class. Can I have that extra English class? And so suddenly, instead of 35 kids in the classroom, I've got 45, because I had a really big classroom. We shoved chairs in there. And then I would say to the students, do you mind? There's some more kids that want to be in here. And we have the window seats. They can sit in the window seats all around the classroom. And some classes we would have 50, 60 kids in them. And the school board called me in at the end of the year and said, you know, we really like you. We want to keep you. We know you're really dedicated to the students, but you're going to have to stick with the curriculum. And whatever it is that's causing you to be the Pied Piper of English teachers, you have to stop it. And teaching jobs were hard to get back then. And this was a really plush school, and I really loved it. And so intellectually, I want to say, of course, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I want my job back. I want you to offer me a contract. And what I said instead, as if my mouth had a life of its own, I said, I'm giving 100,000% of myself to you and to this school and to my students. I never knew that I had this much to give, but I am giving it willingly. And I don't ask for anything. And I cannot do what you're asking, nor will I. I won't even try. Because if you understood what you were asking, you would never ask it. And I walked out on them. And I went home and I cried because I was like, oh no, why didn't you just shut up? Do what you were supposed to do. I love my job. And you know, now it's summer break and I'm not offered a contract and weeks go by and I'm thinking I better start looking at another school and see if I can find another job. And one day the phone rings, and you'll like this. The principal says, what do you want, Anne? I recognize his voice, but he doesn't even say hi. You know, this is Mr. So-and-so. This is, what do you want? And I said, what do you mean, what do I want? What are my options? And because I know what I want my job back. Just give me my job back. I'll be happy. He said, you can have anything you want. And I'm like, what do you mean anything I want? And he said, you haven't heard, have you? And I said, heard what? He said, you know, the school board president's son, he was in your English class. And I said, yeah, I know him. And he said, well, he felt that he should take the science exam this year for National Merit Scholar, but he was a C student in science. And I said, yeah. He said he won National Merit Scholar. He won National Merit Scholar. And when asked, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I hope he didn't say he was quickened, because that's what the kids were all saying. It was a term they had come up with. I didn't even understand yet what it meant. And I said, what did he say? And he said in the interview, when asked, how did you go from being a C student to becoming National Merit Scholar in science? He said, it was my English teacher. She taught me how to learn. And I thought, oh, that was good. That was really good. He said, so now they're bending over backwards, begging me to get you back and give you whatever you want. And so I was very excited to be able to go back. I asked for certain things, nothing for myself, but for my students, and they gave me everything I wanted. And I was able to continue teaching, and I could teach in the more outrageous way that I wanted to teach, and, you know, loved my career. It was great.
Awesome.
So I found the mystical blessings in absolutely everything and continue to do so.
Try explaining that.
Try explaining that. So, you know, to me, it's all about vibration. Even being in that presence of the ocean of, it was called Mercy and Love. I've since seen it written Ocean of Love and Mercy. That is a very high state of heaven. And, you know, in the Bible, it says that there are heavens, you know, and which heaven will you enter into? And this particular heaven is a very high vibration. But I think for all of us, the lesson learned was, remember, everything is always happening exactly as it should, whether it appears that way to you or not. Because regret and worry and doubt and fear, those are all low vibrations. As long as we can trust in God and know that everything is happening exactly as it should, we can stay in this more high vibration, blessed state of consciousness, and life truly moves in a way that's beyond what we've known. And you have an entire show on near-death experiences, so you understood the message when it said there is no death, there's only the appearance of death. And death as an illusion is really important. And that sense of popping out of the body, I mean, I hope it would give solace to those parents who lose children and think that the children suffered in some way, because it is not a suffering experience. It's a blissful, beautiful, wonderful experience. And I know people do have near-death experiences that are rather dark and frightening experiences at times too. And sometimes I believe those might be warning experiences of, you know, the person gets a second opportunity to come back and change their lives. And I've seen those who've done that as well. But for me, it's all blessings. It's all good. I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. It's very interesting. So
I know
I'll
you-
put your links in the description.
Thank you.
All right.
I know you didn't have much of a chance to read before you and I had this conversation, but I also was rescued by dolphins. And I know you had another interviewee whose story I
Yeah,
saw.
Carlos.
That was kind of cool.
Do you want to talk about that?
Do you want me to?
Well, sounds very interesting. Yeah, if you fine with
Okay.
it.
I have about 15 more minutes, so let's try that.
Okay.
Okay. So shall we act like it's a new show instead of jamming them all
No,
together?
go right ahead. No, go right ahead.
Okay. So another experience that that I know that you have interest in, Peggy, is the rescue by dolphin experience, because I know I'm not the only one. But when I was in my early 20s, my mother lived on Hilton Head Island off the coast of South Carolina. And on Christmas Day, I went there, and I'd been going through a lot. I'd been having a lot of, let's call it spiritual crisis, because there were so many things going on in my life. And I wanted to go swimming in the ocean. I'm a strong swimmer. I'm really drawn to the ocean. I love the ocean. But Christmas Day in South Carolina, the ocean is cold. But that happened to be a day when the temperature had soared over 80 degrees. So I figured, well, if I get nice and hot, then the water will feel good and I'll go ahead and go swimming anyway. But when I got to the beach, there wasn't anybody else swimming at all. And I decided I'll go anyway. And I had open presents with my mom, left her to go to the beach and told her I'll be back shortly. And I just want to go for a swim. So I go in the water. This is a private beach where we have friends that have a house right on the water. They weren't home, but I could park my car there. So there's people beach combing, walking up and down the beach, and I don't feel like I'm alone. But I go in the water, but there's no lifeguards. And I start swimming, no problem. As I said, I'm a strong swimmer. And I felt like I was swimming so free and so fast, but what I didn't realize was I was actually in a riptide. And after a while, I realized I was having to struggle, and I knew, wow, look how fast I've been going and how far out I am. And it wasn't a riptide that pulled you under, it just pulled me straight out. And so I wasn't drowning by any means, but it's a long way back to the beach. And I'm thinking, okay, well, people saw me come in, they'll be watching, maybe somebody will come to my rescue if I can't make it back all the way. But I know from my mother living on this island and growing up around the water that there's two things that you have to remember. One, you have to swim laterally to get out of a riptide. You can't fight your way back into the beach. So I have to decide to go right or left and try and figure out in my mind where I'm going to end up with this riptide. And so I'm thinking about that. And then I remembered, oh yeah, and you never go out where the shrimp boats are. So I start, because sharks come where the shrimp boats are because they like to eat the leftovers. So I'm looking around. I don't see any shrimp boats. But then it dawns on me, I should see the shrimp boats because this is where they are. They're off the coast out here somewhere. And I realized they're not here because it's Christmas Day.
Oh.
But no one told the sharks that their restaurant wasn't going to be here. And so now I'm worried, and I'm looking right or left. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to swim to the left. And I look over there because I know where I'll end up, near a hotel, if I get drug out that way. And I see a shark coming right at me. And it's my first thought is for my mother. She is going to hate this. Daughter eaten on Christmas Day. I can see the headline. And I want the hand of God to reach in the water and pick me up, because there's nowhere to go. There's no body. There's no boats. They don't even have jet skis yet. There's nothing. Right? What am I going to do? And I have this one little prayer, just lift me up. I want to be lifted up out of this. And then I thought maybe I should be fighting back. God helps those who help themselves. Have I ever heard a story where you can hit the shark in the nose or whatever? No, I haven't. And then I got this strong inner message that said to lie down long and lean and turn away from the shark and put my hands out straight on my face. And I thought, I was young and skinny. I'm thinking I'm going to look like a French fry, and this thing's just going to come along and gobble me up. But I don't have anything better to do. So I go with the inner guidance because I don't know what to do. And maybe somehow this is God's way of protecting me. So I lie down long and lean and I stretch out, but my heart is pounding like a son of a gun. And I thought, wow, I'm going to die of a heart attack before that shark ever touches me. And I'm glad about that. I don't want any agony of shark eating me or even eating part of me, even worse. And then I have this moment of peace, as if everything is peaceful and perfect. And then I get hit really hard, pounding hard underneath, and I expect to be pulled under. But instead of being pulled under, I feel like I'm on a magic carpet or something. I'm lifted up out of the water. My body is literally lifted out of the water because essentially I've made myself into a platform by lying long and lean face down in the water. And I'm moving toward the beach and I don't understand it. And I don't understand what's happening with the shark and why he's not biting me. And then I'm falling off my platform, realizing I'm on top of something, and I get hit again from underneath, and in front of me, a dolphin flies in front of me, and then another, and then another. And I realize I am on the back of a dolphin. That is what I am. And I actually, for a moment, wondered what I know the difference. I'm taught to know the difference between a shark fin and a dolphin fin because of growing up around the water. But, maybe it wasn't a shark. I'd like to think it wasn't a shark. I'd like to think these dolphins are just rescuing me from being so far out in the middle of the ocean that I couldn't possibly get back on my own. And they do exactly that. They take, I'm not holding onto the dorsal fin. I didn't know to do that then. And so as I would begin to fall off, another dolphin would come and scoop me up from underneath. By lying face down, I had made myself into a platform for the dolphins. So I recognized the connection between the inner message, my cry out to God, asking for help to lift me up. And I was lifted up. They carry me into water that's about chest deep. And then I expect them now to leave, right? Yay, thank you. I'm saying, oh my gosh, thank you. I'm so grateful. And they didn't leave. And it was as if now we go into a performance. This is like a pre-scheduled performance or something that I don't understand at all, because the dolphins encircled me. So they're not like just trying to push me to the beach like you're safe now. It's like I'm safe, but now let's go into Act 2. What's going to happen? And in Act 2, they circle me and they're doing this thing all around my body in a circle, and they're moving. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know dolphin protocol, so I don't know what's happening here, but it's absolutely beautiful. But what happens next, it took me years to talk about this because it was such an intimate act in a way that I was almost embarrassed that the people on the beach were watching this, because of course now there's a whole crowd of people coming. But what they do next is they go from their thing, and one of them stops and he comes toward me and he touches my body, touches my arm, touches my back, touches my other arm, repeats that, and then he goes back into his position in the circle. And then the next one leaves the circle and comes and touches parts of my body, now my legs, now across the back of my head. Every single one of them takes a turn to touch my body. And what I felt was happening, I mean, I'm standing there, the exact person that I was, but I felt that every molecule in my body was being transformed. I had no idea what was happening to me. I mean, now we hear stories of, if you have an autistic child, you might take him to swim with the dolphins because they have a very high vibration and they can help the body harmonize better or whatever. I've never actually experienced that. I've only read articles later because I have such an interest in it now, or that sort of thing, you know. But what are they doing to me and why? And once they finish that, this ceremony of touching me all over from head to toe, I've been touched by one or another of them, gently, beautifully, slowly, lovingly. And then they do this magnificent show as if they're so delighted with themselves and what they've done, this moment in time. They do this thing where they go all around me and they make all these trilling noises and they jump and they leap, still in a circle all around me. And I'm turning in a circle, thanking them and saying, oh my God, I love you. And then finally they line up so that they're on their tail fins and they back away from me, looking at me until they get out far enough, and then they turn and off they go. People start clapping on the beach, and one woman steps in the water, her toes in the water, and she goes, oh my God, do you work with the dolphins? No. I said, no. And as I'm walking into the sand, the people are all crowding around, and I said, I got pulled out by a riptide. That's all I want to tell them. And an old man standing there with binoculars around his neck, he says, you were almost eaten by a shark today, young lady. Those dolphins saved your life. And I said, yeah, I didn't want to think about the shark. And he said, I saw it coming right for you and there was nothing we could do. And I said, yeah, I know, they did save my life. And I don't know about any of this, but they could all see that as happy as I was. Now, remember, I've gone from a riptide being dragged way out into the ocean. I see a shark coming for me. I pray to God, dolphins have appeared, and then this amazing ceremony has occurred, and all these touching things with these high vibration beings has happened, and my body is shaking all over. I am shaking like a leaf. So I reached down and grabbed my towel where I left it. I grabbed my bag and I said, I got to get my bike and go home. And you could tell, you know, they wanted to talk. They wanted to ask questions. And I was like, I can't. Merry Christmas, everybody. And I took my bike and I rode home. And when I got home, my mom said, how was the beach? I couldn't even tell her yet. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, do you know about the dolphins? She said, you know, there's very particular dolphins on this island. And I said, what do you mean? She said, they live here. Other dolphins migrate all over the world. The dolphins of Hilton Head live here and they have their families here and their families stay here. And so there's spinner dolphins and, you know, there's all these dolphin lore on the island. And I said, well, I had an encounter with the dolphins, but I need a nap now. And I went straight to my bed, pulled the covers over my head. And other than my mother, I also didn't talk about that for a long time, except to my high school students. They seemed to know and understand everything. So when I went back as a high school teacher, you know, the kids were saying, oh my gosh, your energy is incredible. I'm like, yeah, I met some dolphins and I don't know what's going to happen next, but life changed completely from that point. And, you know, I am a firm believer in the miraculous and the beautiful, and that there are things happening for us and to us and with us that are divine in every moment, if we can just stay aware, listen for the guidance, follow through when we can, and ask for what we need, and it will be given.
And the power of denial. I mean, it's just a natural response with things like this, where we don't have the brain to put it anywhere. We don't have a culture that tells us what to do with this. So we just go in denial. That couldn't have happened. That just didn't happen. and just leave it there, because
you know, it was my high school students that made it real for me. because when they
That's good.
noticed the difference in me, they were very astute, and they would show up after classes and go, "Do you want to talk about it?" And, and eventually I was able to talk to them, and that was very cool. And many of them to this day, I am still friends with them. It's been many years. Now we're all old together, actually. It's so interesting because I started teaching when I was only, let's see, 21 years old, and my high school students were 16, 17, and 18. So you see, there was only a few years difference, and even after a few years, it's like no more than 5 or 6 years difference at any one time when this occurred. And so now we're old friends together. So interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share some of my stories with you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Peggy. Thank you.